Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So to everyone who's watching at the moment around the globe, wherever you are, welcome. So we're doing this hangout today to discuss accessible travel. As we understand it at Lonely Planet, about half of people with disabilities would travel more if they could be certain of finding suitable facilities. And in light of this, Martin Heng, our host, and Lonely Planet started our Travel for All initiative late last year. The hope was to bring together the appropriate information and voices on the topic of accessible travel. So this hangout's an example of that. We'll hopefully be doing a couple more in the future. And beyond this actual hangout that we're running today, there's a Google Plus community group that you can access via our Google Plus page called Travel for All, and that's moderated by Martin, and it's a space for all types of accessible travel discussion. So at this point, I might hand over to Martin, who's going to maybe just do a quick introduction on each of our hosts, and then he might have some questions at the very end. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, thanks, Seb. I think maybe some of you who are watching will have read the bios. Not everybody has joined us quite yet. We have with us Ivor Ambrose, who works as an independent consultant, providing research and project management expertise to public sector organisations, to NGOs and companies in Europe. And in 2006, he brought together an international group, including Visit Britain and the Hellenic Ministry of Tourism, NGOs from Belgium, Spain and Greece, university and management specialists to create the European Network for Accessible Tourism. We've got Bill Forrester from here in Melbourne. Sorry, Ivor's based in Athens. We've got Bill Forrester from Melbourne, who founded Travelability in 2007 as the vehicle to publish accessible travel information. And the mission statement of his company is simply making the world accessible to all. Bill's a very acknowledged expert in the accessible travel field and spoken at several kind of high-level conferences around the world, and very much an advocate for shifting the paradigm away from it being a disability rights issue in favour of being an economic imperative. And the final person we've got with us at the moment, although we may have some more guests later, is Damiano La Rocca, who works for Seable Holidays, who specialise in accessible sport and leisure activities, leisure holidays for people with limited mobility and the visually impaired. Working closely with a charity called Life, Seable tailors holidays designed to improve confidence and skills for life while challenging perceptions of disability and blindness. And just two examples, scuba diving for paraplegics and the blind, Seable has hosted the 2 world record holders in each category, and 4-wheel driving tours for the blind and visually impaired around Mount Etna. So pushing the boundaries, pushing the boundaries. So I'd like to kick this off straight away with what I was talking about is Bill's hobby horse, if you like, and that's moving the agenda along from this being a social inclusion and disability rights issue to looking at more at the economic benefits to be reaped from an accessible tourism strategy. Now, quite coincidentally, accessible travel guru Scott Rains recently published a video on YouTube advocating the establishment of a national inclusive tourism organisation in the USA. And what Scott says in the context of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and in particular Article 30, which states that parties recognise the rights of persons with disabilities to take part on an equal basis with others in cultural life, and that persons with disabilities should enjoy access to theatres, museums, libraries and tourism services and tourism venues. He argues that the legislative battle for inclusion has largely been won, and it is time to move on to the next phase. And the next phase is to ensure that transnational collaboration across all sectors of society. Now, my first question to the panel is Scott right? Is he being generous in not mentioning that although there are 158 signatories to the convention, So only a handful of countries haven't signed. Only 144 have ratified it, and that includes exceptions such as the USA, Netherlands, Finland, and Ireland. It's one thing to ratify the convention, it's another thing to put into meaningful effect. So, is Scott right? Have we won the legislative battle, and are we ready to move on to the next phase? Ivor.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. It's good points you've raised there, and I think that this very perceptive and important message that we've seen on the video from Scott already. It is a very important message that, of course, the UN Convention is a key document. That's a point around which we can focus attention, and it brings this whole issue in front of a whole new range of people. It was actually the convention that was signed, I think, by more countries than any other UN convention when it was introduced in 2007, and so there's a very strong will to make this work. But it's very true what you just said, that having a convention is one thing, and having it ratified is one thing, but actually implementing it is quite another. So in that sense, yes, perhaps Scott is being a little bit generous to say the legislative battle has been won. But even to get these statements on paper about equal rights and making sure that people are covered by a legislative document is very important for moving forward to the next stage of our agenda. We've all got a varied history in accessible tourism, as we call it, accessible travel, and I think it's important to see where the many different stakeholders are coming from. And it's true that not all stakeholders are particularly interested in legislation, and perhaps least of all the tourism businesses, who tend to have a kind of I'm generalizing massively now, but there's not such a positive impression among tourism suppliers to be bothered about legislation. I mean, that's something that tends to be rather oppressive. I'm generalizing massively, as I said, but it's felt that legislation is not the thing that drives business. It's really about
more a burden and a hindrance.
Yeah, and we hear a lot about this. I'm speaking from Europe. We hear a lot about, and the European Commission has been looking through all kinds of legislation to try and reduce red tape, to reduce the legislative burden on small businesses in particular, because it's as if there's been a flurry of legislation, particularly in Europe, about how to control and regulate and manipulate, if you like, small businesses. And I think in many cases, quite justifiably, they are saying, hey, come on, there's quite enough things that we have to comply with, and let's just get on with our business if we may. And I think that word comply is a difficult one. You know, if you've got legislation, yes, people have to comply with it, but compliance is not what is going to drive accessible tourism. And I think Bill could very well take over from me on that point, because he has a very clear perception of this as well, I think.
Yes, I know, Bill. You've written a paper, well, at least one paper on about the economic benefits to businesses, and that's really the carrot and the stick. I mean, the compliance is the stick, and really, I think, you know, possibly what's going to move the debate along is the carrot. Now, Bill, perhaps you could share some of the main points you make about the size and the potential for the market, particularly in the context of the so-called kind of greying of society and the progressive retirement of the baby boomer generation.
Thanks, thanks, Martin. I think it's a two-edged sword. We've spoken a fair bit recently about the size of the market, and that was all based on research really done by Simon Darcy. There's been a little bit of research since. But if you extrapolate out the effect of the baby boomers, the market could well represent 25% of the total tourism spend in less than 6 years by 2020. But even that's the carrot. 25% of the market is a huge number. Now, we've already seen people like Visit Britain start to put accessible tourism into their core tourism strategies. Germany's done likewise. Only last week, wasn't it, Ivor? Greece announced a similar escalation of the priorities of accessible tourism into mainstream tourism strategy. So there is a recognition that the business case exists. I don't believe yet, and here's the next stage of the whole thing, and perhaps what Scott was sort of hinting at in his video, that hasn't translated yet into a customer product, in my view. And I think there's probably another step we need to take now, and that is to translate accessible tourism from legislation to business case to actually what that means to the operators within the industry in terms of product that the disabled traveller is actually going to want and need.
I guess, I mean, I think we only have one member of the panel at the moment who is actually providing a product, a direct service to the community, and that's Damien. So, what do you have to say about that, Damian?
My vision on this, obviously, I'm the youngest of the group as well, and I have realized the need of a product, of a service that is missing in the market. I've realized that by a simple dissertation during my degree on how to make my own region more accessible and more attractive to the disabled community. And obviously, once you get into the number, then you realize that this is a problem that everyone, most countries, especially in Europe, are facing when they try to offer something exciting for the disabled community. And obviously, when I started it, I didn't even bother to look at the legislations on this matter, because there is so much more that we as operators need to focus to make a product interesting. And my way of creating that product was to actually create something different than the current offer, for example, in the UK as a starting point. So if you look at what's on offer in the UK market for the disabled community is, first of all, very generalized. So when you look for holidays for disabled people, you don't have a clear division from physical disabilities to mental disabilities, blind people, deaf people. It's all mixed up. It's all under one category, and it shouldn't be like that, because there is so many different needs that you need to actually fulfill before creating an offer that is going to be satisfying everyone. And another thing is that I realized while creating something which is related to sport or activities or anything more than just a simple accommodation and transport, that this is currently what everyone does. So there is the leading companies in UK and even in the network, in the European network that Ivor is leading, that most of the people just offer, for example, accommodation and transport to people. And that's very limiting, because if a wheelchair user, and Martin here, you can back me up on this, if you need to travel, you need to know a lot of more information before going to a place rather than just accommodation and transport. You need to know what you can do. You need to know if the restaurants around are accessible, if you can actually go from the hotel to the other side of the road without problems. You need to know if there is going to be any excursion which is going to be suitable for you, if anyone locally will be able to support you, if there is transport with ramp, or maybe if there is dogs, the dogs for blind people are allowed, if there is any hearing aid available. So it's way more complex, and there's so much things we need to know before actually going and look into legislations. So obviously mine is a very streetwise way of operating, but this is what I've got so far from the 2 years of actually offering holidays in Sicily.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Damiano. I think you make some good points, and especially the fact that you are catering to I guess particularly to a couple of different sectors of the market, but there are an infinite number of different people with different abilities, and everybody, and this is where I speak from my direct experience, with just within even just within the spinal cord injured community, every single injury is different, and everybody's levels of ability and disability is different, and there's no one size fits all, and therefore every individual needs to be able to access information that will convince or will allow them to make good decisions based on their own abilities about whether an environment, whether it be a restaurant, whether it be accommodation, whether it be a region or a city, whether it will be suitable for them. And I think accessing that information at that detailed level is really hard.
Yeah, it is definitely hard. So obviously, everyone needs to work from a small scale, starting from a city, and use that as a pilot that can be replicated to every other city. And obviously, that would need someone more probably some levels. Yeah, that's when the legislations come in, and then they can set out a set of rules that needs to be applied before you can actually say that you offer an accessible service.
Well, I think it's interesting what you say about, I mean, on a city level, because over the last few years there's been a proliferation of websites and mobile apps that seek to crowdsource information, and they're all very, very localized to their environment. So there's even one here in Melbourne. There's one in Sydney. There's one in Boston. There's I think probably the biggest one is the one in Chasséde in France, which has something like 31,000 reviews in its database. But most of those are in France. So I mean that's still quite local. I think and it's very difficult to access that information from outside the locality unless you actually have access or know about these kind of localized sources of data and information. The question is, how do we join these up? How do we kind of disseminate this information more effectively?
Martin, can I come back to what I think Scott was trying to hint at? And what I said earlier about developing an understanding and changing the roles of DPOs to be more educators than enforcers or vigilantes.
Yep.
If you have a look at the tourism industry historically has been very, very adept and innovative in developing product to meet needs. It's come up with adventure product, cultural product, sustainable product, environmental tourism, all sorts of things, because it understands the customer need. Now, I think the big difference here and the risk in legislature versus education is legislature is prescriptive. And by definition then, it's going to try and be all things to all men or women. And more importantly, it's going to try and homogenize disability. Now, Damien's right. Disability is not homogeneous at all. It's a complete continuum of ability. Unless we shift that mindset where the tourism industry actually starts to understand the sorts of things that someone with a disability wants to do, and I say that loosely, because someone with a disability comes from all walks of life, all sorts of aspirational backgrounds, and it's got to understand that it needs to come up with solutions and product that enables those travellers to achieve what they want to achieve.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to remember that a lot of people with a disability will take the easy option and will go on a cruise, whereas in fact,
They will.
as you say, everybody wants different things from a holiday, and they have a right to choose to do different things, which is why it's great that companies such as Sea Able is offering a more active and adventurous kind of experience for people who want that. And there are able-bodied people who enjoy going on a cruise. There are able-bodied people who enjoy going and relaxing at a five-star resort and sunbathing and reading a book. And there are those who like a jungle adventure.
Or want canoes with built-in stability backrest so that they can go and join their mates on an ocean kayak adventure. It's
important that the whole gamut of experience be open to those who have a variety of different abilities and disabilities.
But in one sense, that means turning the DPO role on its head, because instead of homogenous legislation, what we're now talking about are people working with the tourism industry to create product across a vast spectrum of aspirational demands, which I think is the thrust of Scott's video. The question is, how do you actually achieve that?
Well, that's right. Now, I mean, I think, and perhaps you can answer this question. I was going to ask Carrie-Anne and Brian about this because they work closely with Visit England and Visit Scotland. What is the role of the national tourism body, the national and local tourism bodies in helping to create this environment in which small and medium-sized businesses can actually cater to these needs? What leading role do they need to take?
Can I come in on that, Martin?
Yes, I would.
Thanks. I think we've heard some very important points here, and I really liked Damiano's presentation, his explanation. That of course you have to get very close to the customers. You have to make something as the tourism supplier. You have to find out what the customer really wants and needs, and this is what's lying behind Bill's question as well. Is like, what is the role of the disabled people's organizations now? I don't think it's ever been so effective as the disabled people's organizations in general. They tend to talk a lot about legislation, and it seems almost like the magic bullet, the silver bullet, that's going to solve everything. And we know it doesn't solve everything. And I don't think that the development in tourism is going to be legislation-led at all. I think legislation is the backstop for all of this, and that's when legislation comes in, when things go wrong. So we don't talk about legislation really as driving things forward, but it's nice to have, It's going to make things more effective in the long run. But let's look at how successful suppliers are actually achieving what we're talking about to deliver an accessible experience to people. I think and we could take that from the top down, if you like, from the national tourist organizations. Take, for example, in Europe, Catalonia. The Catalonia is a region of Spain, and the tourist board there has done an excellent job over many years. They've built up a good reputation for offering accessible tourism in all kinds of respects: cultural tourism, gastronomy, sailing, hand biking, all kinds of things you can do in the Catalonia region. But that's because it's been encouraged by the National Tourist Board. They've encouraged their suppliers to make their facilities more accessible to different kinds of people, and they've helped people understand what the needs are of people with visual impairments and hearing impairments and mobility impairments. They've had a very active policy there, and in the end, it comes down to each individual supplier saying, okay, I've got a restaurant here, what do I need to do with that? Just to get a few more people in the door, okay, I'll have to fix put in a ramp, or I'll have to widen something, or I'll have to offer a large print menu or whatever it is. But there are a whole sequence of things that a supplier can do to make themselves that little bit more accessible to all kinds of customers. And that means actually just setting down some benchmarks for certain things and giving people these ideas, putting them in front of them. Visit England has done very much the same thing with some excellent brochures and explanations of what you can do with very little money, actually, to improve the accessibility of your offer.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make. Is often these changes, these improvements are very low cost and very simple, and they will definitely lead to an increase in business.
Right. I'll also come back to one point, which is how you get the information, the quest for information about all this. Because Damiano also pointed out that you can't always find the information about the whole supply chain, and this is something that we've seen. We've been doing some research the last year for the European Commission, and this will be published this summer. But we've been doing some research about the supply chains in accessible tourism, about how things are joined up or not joined up. And there are some crucial points there. You can see that if a whole journey is not accessible, then it's not going to work for people. And we hear so often this positive sounding argument that, okay, if you make yourselves accessible, customers who are disabled will come again and again. And yeah, that's fine. But on the other hand, if you look at it from the customer point of view, why should they have to come again and again to the same place just because that one place is accessible? It's much better if disabled people can have the freedom of choice and go to many places. So that's two arguments there in side by side, that it's very good if suppliers make themselves accessible, but let's get them more customers and more different customers, not the same customers every year.
That's right, and it's no good having an accessible hotel that you can't reach with accessible public transport or accessible transport.
Right.
It's no good having an accessible hotel in a region where none of the attractions is accessible. So yes, all the different suppliers of the different services and products do need to be working together. And I think, from my point of view, you do need to look to the regional and the national tourism bodies to take the initiative, to take the lead, to encourage its suppliers to get on, to jump on board.
Yeah.
If I can join in on this, I just wanted to mention also that the European Union is in the past 5 years, obviously, has given a lot of money, has put money available to any service that want to become more accessible, and this has been given to the different all over Europe. So there is lots of funding available for people who want to implement their premises. They want to, I don't know, make more room accessible in their hotels, or create ramps, or creating aids for visual and hearing aid. So there is the option now, I think, given to everyone if they want to make them a more accessible offer. And people are currently taking advantage of this. So they're getting this money from the European Union. They are implementing their services. They are improving. They are creating an accessible offer, as you can see from the networks that, for example, Ivor is leading, that there is lots of people that offer accessible services. And I think another major point is how to market this, because there might be lots of accessible offer all over Europe or US or Australia, but I'm not yet sure how to get this to the client. So how to actually reach the client and tell them that we have what they want. And this is something that it's a new thing coming up. So I'm trying different strategies. I've been trying different strategies since I started, and every strategy has been good and bad. So I can't really give a definition on, okay, we have an accessible product, now we need to market it this way to reach these clients, because so far I haven't actually managed to get a fixed strategy on how to reach the clients. But obviously, as soon as we get the first one to come into a place, then the repeat business would come to place. And by repeat, I mean obviously not that they have to come all the time to the same place, but also that when they come back, they spread the word and they say, yes, if you go to Spain, Spain, they have all these accessible places. But then again, it is very difficult to actually make the customer aware that there is chances. There is too much from the past experiences. Sicily is not accessible. I'm just giving an example based on my experience. No one would come to Italy, no one would come to Sicily because it's famous for not being accessible. So I'm now trying to educate people that actually by collaborating with charities, with local services, with local tour operators, actually if there is this much collaboration, you can make any place accessible. It's very little things and local things that you need to do. And yeah, but a key strategy for us operators would be to understand better how to market these products that we are creating, and that's where I'm struggling, and probably everyone else.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry. I think, Damiano, you make a very good point there when you said, word of mouth. I think this is really important. We've been talking about change from the top down, from a legislative point of view, or from the leadership of the national and regional tourism bodies. But I think it's really, really important to remember the power of word of mouth. And when I say the power of word of mouth, it's really, I think, we need to look to new technology and the power of social media and the willingness of the disabled communities to help each other and to help their peers by sharing the information. So, I mean, the power is not all in the hands of the people at the top. These days, with the technology at our disposal and the power of social media, the power also resides within the communities themselves. And I think that this is certainly something that I, in my Travel for All projects, I'm hoping to harness.
Okay.
Except, Martin, can I just jump in there for a minute? When it comes to travel, I'm not sure that's 100% right. Nearly 80% of travel is still booked through some form of intermediary, whether it be through an online travel agency or whether it's through bricks and mortar type applications. Very few people even today piece a whole holiday together, including individual bookings with individual establishments. I think Damien's got a point. It's not just about developing product within the tourism providers per se, but it's actually harnessing the knowledge of the product and the knowledge of customer needs through the entire supply chain. We've already heard Ivor said the supply chain is the weak link. But if you look at the supply chain, you have got at the very bottom of the supply chain a whole heap of tourism providers. Now, whether that's accommodation houses, restaurants, concert venues, sporting venues, attractions, theme parks or whatever, they're at the bottom rung. Most of that product is then packaged up into some form of consolidated wholesale product, which brings together certain attractions and accommodation, transport and the like. Finally, that wholesale product then ends up in the hands of either the online retailers like your Pricelines in the States, your Thomas Cook's in the UK, Flight Centre here, or your bricks and mortar storefronts. Now, I don't believe accessible tourism at this point gets beyond a smattering of the bottom level providers. It doesn't get into any consolidated wholesale product. It doesn't get into any tour operators product, and it certainly never makes any retail product. Given that it's 25% of the market, that is the biggest sector of tourism. It even outstrips sustainable tourism. So,
yeah. So you're saying that somebody needs to join the dots. Somebody needs to connect the different elements of the supply chain, just as Ivor said that.
Yeah, and I think until such time as we can get those dots connected, your social media is only going to affect a smattering of the total market. The other thing to bear in mind here, this market in the next 20 years is going to be driven by retiring baby boomers. They are not going to identify with the traditional disability social networks. They're going to expect mainstream information, like your Lonely Planet guides, which have been historically mainstream. And let me get really philosophical for a minute. Most of the baby boomers grew up with Lonely Planet because the founders of Lonely Planet are now baby boomers.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that's very, very at the forefront of my mind, Bill, as well. That the initial Lonely Planet community, as it grew up, it started 40 years ago, and you're absolutely right. These are indeed.
I grew up with it. I had Lonely Planets in my backpack, and I'm now a baby boomer.
Yep.
And I'm going to.
Sorry, Martin. I'll just interject. We've got a couple of questions and comments that I might chirp in about 5 minutes. Just a bit of a
warning. By all means.
So I would expect, look, the baby boomers have gone through history expecting, and the best example still is Levi Strauss had to expand the waistline of their jeans and change their style because the baby boomers actually grew into middle age and got fatter.
Yep.
The baby boomers are going to expect to be serviced. It's the first generation in the world that have got a very much a me attitude. And I don't think the tourism industry has yet woken up to the fact that this is more mainstream than minority. And that's where I think even the DPOs haven't woken up, that they need to expand their horizons into the more mainstream and not concentrate on their traditional disability horizons. I might be wrong on that, but...
No, I agree, Bill. I mean, this is the first generation that will be retiring with both the means, with the money, and the sense of entitlement.
Yep.
And the wish to spend their money and not leave it to future generations as generations prior to them did.
And they won't see themselves as disabled in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
I think just to add up on that point, I think what Bill is also trying to say here, that probably there is no clear strategy anyway, because there is the young generation now that will do everything via social media, and there is another big chunk of people that would come through agencies. So the strategy would not be ever, even in 50 years' time, there will be always people that will try and book through an intermediate, someone like a tour operator or something else, and you kind of have to hit all those buttons to reach everyone.
Yeah, maybe. Can I come in with something there? I think it's just one thing to mention in all of this, how the information gets out to people, or how the marketing is actually conducted. We do see a strange phenomenon sometimes that a hotel or any kind of supplier does the work. They make some provisions to make their buildings or their services more accessible. They can also put this information into a report, into a PDF document that they can send to people and so on. But the strange thing is that a lot of this information is still left under the counter. It's information that you can get if you ask for it, but it's never on the website. It's never up at the front. It's never part of the whole image of what they're trying to sell. And that's the most peculiar thing, that we often say. People come back to us sometimes and say, "Hey, look, we did all this. We put in the ramps. We fixed the steps. We did all this and that." But people don't come. And then we look at their website and we say, "Yeah, but you didn't advertise that. You didn't tell people that, and you're not reaching the people because you don't put this information in front of them." And so there is this huge. I wouldn't even call it resistance or hesitancy. I just think it's a gap. There's a blockage. There's a huge gap between the people who are actually working in a business and fixing things, and very often the people who are marketing that business and promoting it, and even the tour operators and all these people who are assimilating and aggregating the offers. They don't pick up on this information, which is crucial for so many people in the market the strata that we're talking about. So this is crucial information. This is the first thing you want to know. It's not the last thing you want to know. So, I mean, we give you some fantastic 5-star hotels where they can give you a whole CD with pictures and with information about the accessibility, but there's not a mention on the website. So this information is there, it's available, but it's just not being sent out to people.
And this is what I found is it's not necessarily a lack of infrastructure, it is the ability to find that information about the infrastructure.
And Martin, I might jump in there because that's a very good point in which to dive into a couple of probably more comments rather than questions, and maybe if I just put a couple of them to you guys, to the panel, you might be able to give us your thoughts on them. So Brian Seaman, who was hoping to join us, just made the comment very much in line with what you were just saying, Martin, where he said, we need to ensure the accuracy of information and advice which is given to service providers so that they can provide seamless, accessible services. This comes down to training and also to consultation with people who are disabled or older people. Martin, perhaps you could sort of touch on that in the context of travel for all and what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. I mean, well, I've got there are two main streams of work that I'm working on them, and one is the Travel for All Google Plus site, in which I'm kind of aggregating information and hoping that more and more people will post information about their own businesses on that site, as well as other people posting about their own experiences. And the other is a pilot project, Accessible Melbourne ebook. Now, in that project, we're using the base content from the regular mainstream Melbourne and Victoria guidebook, and we're seeking feedback from the community on the accessibility of the venues that are reviewed. We're also going, I'm personally also going to kind of carry on my own research using by phone, by web, by actually visiting the places to supplement and augment the base information we have about any given venue, to augment it with information on the accessibility of that venue, and also to make sure that the information in the Melbourne book is supplemented and augmented by the information people need to get around, to get out and about. So accessible transport options. So those are the two streams of work that I'm doing with Lonely Planet.
Yeah, good. And Martin, that kind of relates to, I'll say two comments here, but two different things that have come in. One is from Pieter, who said, I agree with Damiano. Apart from information, which is very important, it's also about reputation, which goes beyond knowledge. It's about people expecting to find good information about accessible services on a certain travel destination. And then the other comment from Peter, which you might be able to explore quickly, is something that strikes me about the funding matter is that very often the ROI question is focused on the effect on people with disabilities. In my point of view, improving accessibility has a big effect on the whole travel market. Now, that's something where you guys were sort of touching on earlier. Do you want to explore that a bit further at all?
Can I comment on that just quickly?
Yep.
One of the historic things that I think we do wrong in accessible tourism, and that most DPOs do wrong, is they continually quote a figure of between, depending on where in the world you are, of between 15 and 20% of the population has a disability. Now, that in itself is a large number, but it's got absolutely nothing to do with the economics, because we know from research that on day trips or outings, the multiplier effect is about 2.8, because nobody travels alone. On overnight trips, that number goes up to 3.4. And when you start looking at conferences and the corporate MICE market, the number goes out to probably about multiply by 50. Now, the multipliers are the people that would travel with somebody with a disability. And by not providing information or not providing accessible services, you're not just missing out on the 20%, you're missing out on all those people that would travel with them. Around the world at the moment, in particular in the conference market, we know that in Europe, the US, in places like Australia, virtually every Western nation has diversity of employment policies encouraging organisations and government departments to employ more people with a disability. Now, once you start talking the multiplier effect, the economics become enormous in terms of the market that is potentially lost by not providing those sorts of facilities or information on those sorts of facilities.
And Bill, maybe you can talk about the success story of the Scandic hotel chain in that regard.
Well, Scandic in particular developed their own product through altruistic means. It was really to give somebody who was going blind an ongoing management job. Now, they can't build hotel rooms fast enough catering for that market because people now trust Scandic. They trust that they've got the right facilities, and they all want to go there for the same purposes.
And they've cornered the market very much in terms of, you're talking about the multiplier effects and the conference.
Absolutely cornered the market in terms of that multiplier. And again, as Damien said, it's all about trust. It's all about trust and reputation. And once you've got that trust and reputation, you've got a huge competitive advantage.
I think I wanted to add here is what Ivor said before, that people that, for example, accommodation hotels, they have the information available, they have improved their services, so they can accommodate disabled. And most of the people all over Europe, the reason I think why they're not advertising it so much is because they still don't believe in the value of making this information available. So they don't see the money, so they wouldn't spend on saying we have accessible facilities and all these. So I think a good point here, which is obviously my main goal for the next few years, is to go to these people and show them what my experience has been and how many clients we've managed to get in Sicily by simply putting together this information and tell them what's available. But yes, there is a very misconception about the accessible tourism value, and people don't see. When I mean people, I mean infrastructure, services locally. They don't see yet. Some people do. Scandic does, but in general, the other people, especially locally, they don't yet see the full package that can come. So they don't see the full value of offering accessible services to this new market segment.
And Damiano, I'll just chip in here with one final comment, which touches on what you were just saying about misconceptions within this category. And Chris makes the point that SMEs make up a major part of the tourism sector, and a big issue is engagement with them, reaching them with messages about the business case that overturns many stereotype perceptions about accessibility. Primarily, that accessibility is seen as just one segment, when in reality it is made up of groups of different people with many different access requirements.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier.
Go on.
Yeah, and I think, Martin, maybe that's a good point about how the Travel for All initiative is trying to cater not just to one segment, not just to wheelchair users, but to a range of different people with an array of impairments.
Sure. Now, before we finish, I'd like. I mean, there is a landmark accessible tourism conference scheduled for later this year, which Ivor is the co-chair. That's Destinations for All. Ivor, could you just very briefly let us know how the conference has come about, who you've attracted to attend the conference, and what you hope is going to come out of it? Is this going to help join up the dots in the supply chain and help kind of consolidate people's efforts?
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, the conference is in Montreal, Canada, 19th to the 22nd of October this year. The conference is titled Destinations for All, and it's the initiative of the NGO, the disability organization Kerul, which has been working for almost, I think, 30 years now on issues to do with accessibility in transport and tourism in the region of Quebec. They put together the conference and drew together a committee of the global players. And so we from Europe have stepped in. We're working alongside the United Nations World Tourism Organization in this. Organizations like ONCE Foundation from Spain. We also have the French Tourisme Handicap involved, and a great many other organizations that decided we should try and make this the first World Summit on Accessible Tourism, which is going to be looking particularly at accessibility in tourism, in transportation, and access to culture. So these are the three main themes. And we also feel that this is coming right now at a good time, because we do feel, especially from Europe, that we are turning a corner here, that things are getting better. We may have been talking down the issue rather in this past hour, where we've been pointing out what's wrong in a lot of cases rather than what's working well. But I think we're reaching a point now where when we focus on that destination level, the destinations are the key to driving accessible tourism forward. And we see that some key destinations and regions and cities are putting this together, are joining the supply chains and taking an active role to bring together all these accessible partners and make tourism accessible in different parts of the world. So we've got a map of the world at the moment with some little hotspots where you can probably quite reliably go and have a very accessible experience, let's say, put it in general terms. But we want to bring this experience together and see what are the common strands from these different efforts, because they've all grown from different backgrounds and different ideas, I think. And now is the time to take stock of this and to try and share this experience. So we're very much about sharing the good experiences from different parts of the world. And we got more than 140 abstracts for formal papers, if you like, for presentations. We'll be sifting through these over the Easter break now and bringing out a program in a couple of months' time where you'll be able to see what exactly we're presenting there. And I hope, as several people on this conversation will be there, to try to move forward from this. The conference itself is not the objective, but to move to the next stage, which is to have, let's say, a more robust and a stronger working partnership and a network around the world where people can dip in to get resources, to get information, and to try and work together to draw the world together around the theme of accessibility.
And share ideas and share things that have worked.
Exactly, yes.
Cool, we might have to wrap it up now, guys. Martin, was there anything final you wanted to say, or is that all good?
No, I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us and thank them for their thoughts. And maybe we can do this again. I'm hoping that to do something similar with our friends in the US, which we couldn't join us because of the difference. So I'm hoping to do the similar thing with some friends in the US and some contacts over there, such as Scott. But if you guys are happy to do this again, we can do this again down the track a bit.
Yes, sure. And the best place,
Sure.
the best place for people who might be interested to watch on to find out about that would be on our Google Plus page. So I might stop the broadcast now. There's a few additional comments that were on the event. If you posted them, apologies we didn't get to it, but I'm sure Martin and some of the other panelists who took part today will be able to chirp in on those and get back to you over the next couple of days. And yeah, thanks to all our panelists for joining, and thanks to all those for watching on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next time.
Thanks, Jules.
And also, I just wanted to say, if anyone who's listening from the European region for the next year, I'm going to be looking at creating more packages. So if anyone is based in different countries and want to actually get in touch to probably offer their products, I'll be happy to look into it and maybe add it to our offers.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that, Damiano. Okay, see you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.